It was framed as a simple sit-down. Two women, no studio audience, no applause, no softening laughter. Just a table, two microphones, pointed questions, and nowhere to retreat. But in this imagined interview, the moment Meghan Markle sat across from Megyn Kelly, the tone in the room shifted. The smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. The pauses stretched a little too long, and under every courteous sentence, something already felt like it was starting to fracture. By the end of their time together, one of them would lose their grip on the moment, and the other would make absolutely sure the cameras remembered it. The room was quiet in a way that felt engineered. No crowd energy, no reaction shots, no warm-up comic to soften the edges. Just muted lighting, simple chairs, a bare table, and two red recording lights glowing like tiny, unblinking witnesses. Meghan Markle adjusted in her seat, crossing one leg over the other with practiced grace. Her face was composed, assured, almost detached. A faint smile rested there, the kind that implied she'd already decided she was above whatever this conversation might become. Across from her, Megyn Kelly glanced down at the notes in front of her, then up again, expression calm and almost dispassionate, controlled, professional, at least on the surface. Megyn began, voice smooth and even. "Thanks for agreeing to do this." Megyn dipped her head once. "Of course," she replied. "I think these kinds of dialogues matter, especially when women are actually given space to speak without restriction." The way she landed on "without restriction" did not go unnoticed. Megyn gave a small, polite smile. "That's precisely the goal here." A brief silence, just long enough to be noticeable. Megyn leaned forward a fraction, signaling she was fully engaged. "You've talked a lot about reclaiming your voice, about stepping away from royal life, about autonomy and agency. But a lot of viewers feel the way you present that story isn't always consistent." Megyn's smile tightened at the edges. "That's an interesting way to describe someone's lived experience," she said lightly. Megyn didn't pull back. "Is it?" she asked. "Or is it reasonable to ask questions when specific details seem to shift depending on where you tell it?" The air changed temperature. Megyn tipped her head slightly, her eyes sharpening. "I don't think a person has to narrate painful experiences in exactly the same way every time for them to be real." "Of course not," replied Megyn, "but if you're asking millions of people to trust your story, consistency does affect how they receive it." Megyn gave a soft, breathy laugh, more dismissive than amused. "Consistent according to who?" she asked. "Tabloid editors? Commentators who've built careers criticizing everything I do?" Megyn's tone stayed level. "According to the wider audience," she said, "according to people paying close attention." Megyn eased back in her chair and folded her arms across her chest. The motion was small, but unmistakably defensive. "I always find it fascinating how the moment a woman talks about her hurt, suddenly everyone else becomes an expert on the correct way for her to do it." Megyn nodded slowly. "And I'm always struck how criticism is often rebranded as attack the moment it becomes uncomfortable." Silence settled between them. Megyn's jaw flexed slightly. She glanced away for a heartbeat, then back. "You know, this is starting to feel less like a conversation and more like a cross-examination." Megyn met her eyes evenly. "Only if straightforward questions feel threatening," she said. That one landed. Megyn's smile returned, but this time it was colder. "I came here to talk about the work I'm doing, my projects, my advocacy." "And we'll absolutely get there," replied Megyn, "but all of that sits inside a very public storyline, one you've played a major role in shaping." Megyn's fingers tapped the table once, then stilled. "So you're suggesting I fabricated my own story?" she asked. "I'm asking whether you've curated it," she answered. "There's a difference." The distinction hung heavy in the air. Megyn leaned forward now, mirroring Megyn's posture. I don't have to curate pain, she said quietly. It exists whether you approve of it or not. Pain exists, agreed Megyn. So does responsibility for how it's presented. At this point, the tension wasn't subtle anymore. Megyn let out a sharp breath. This is exactly what I mean. Women like me are expected to justify themselves on loop, while other people get praised for saying nothing at all. Megyn raised one eyebrow. Is that silence, or is it self-control? Megyn's tone sharpened. That sounds a lot like judgment. Megyn's answer was instant. Only if you think it applies to you. Another pause, this one heavier. Megyn shifted in her chair and smoothed her sleeve, a faint tell. You know, I agreed to this because I assumed you were capable of nuance, she said. I am, replied Megyn. That's why I'm asking direct questions instead of offering you a free sympathy segment. Megyn's eyes flashed. I'm not here for sympathy. No, said Megyn quietly. You're here for control. That was the first real break, not the blow-up, but the fracture that would lead there. Megyn stared at her for a beat, taken aback. Then she smiled again, slow and deliberate. Well, she said, voice velvety but pointed, this is already more revealing than I anticipated. Megyn flicked her gaze briefly toward the camera, then back. You certainly are. And somewhere between those two lines, it became obvious. They weren't just debating a story anymore, they were fighting over power, and neither had any intention of yielding it. The room seemed to contract, not literally, but emotionally, like the walls inched closer the second Megyn realized this wasn't going to be a friendly platform. She uncrossed her arms and leaned in once more, this time with clear purpose. You keep framing all of this as some kind of power grab, but isn't it interesting that women only get accused of being controlling when they refuse to stay quiet? Megyn nodded once. That's absolutely true in a lot of cases, she said, and then added, after a beat, but not universally. Megyn's eyes narrowed. And which group do you think I fall into? Megyn didn't pause. The one where silence didn't vanish, it was replaced by saturation. Megyn gave a dry, incredulous laugh. That's clever, but also incredibly unfair. Is it? Asked Megyn, still calm. You've spoken through podcasts, streaming specials, print interviews, book deals, public appearances. Meanwhile, you continue to describe yourself as someone who had no voice. Megyn's tone hardened. You're confusing having access to a microphone with having control over your life. Megyn glanced briefly at her notes, then looked up again. Then let's talk about control, she said. You left the royal structure, correct? Yes, Megyn replied quickly. I did. You kept your title, Megyn added, correct? Megyn shifted slightly in her seat. That's not. And you negotiated extremely lucrative media partnerships. Megyn's lips pressed together. You've built a significant public identity around that departure, Megyn said, voice steady. So at what point does telling your truth become building a strategy around it? The silence that followed felt dense. Megyn drew in a long breath. I'm not going to apologize for surviving, or for using my voice to encourage others to do the same. Megyn's tone softened a hint, but not much. Uplifting others can be powerful, she said. It just gets complicated when everything keeps rotating around one person's orbit. Megyn scoffed. So now I'm just self-involved? I didn't use that word. I said the focus is centered on you. Megyn backed abruptly and shook her head. This is precisely the double standard. Women are told they can speak as long as they do it in a way that doesn't upset anyone. Or as long as they're willing to be accountable, countered Megyn. Megyn's tone rose half a notch. You keep leaning on that word accountable, like I owe something to people who will never live what I've lived. Megyn answered without raising her own volume. The moment you step onto a global stage, you're asking the public's trust. That comes with questions." Meghan smiled again, but frustration glinted underneath. "And who made you the judge of that?" she asked. "The same audience you're still speaking to," Meghan replied. "They decide what they believe." Meghan's fingers curled around the arm of her chair. "Let's strip this down," she said, "because right now this doesn't feel like journalism, it feels like punishment." Meghan tilted her head. "Punishment for what?" she asked. "For having the audacity to walk away from a system that was designed to crush me." Meghan's tone stayed measured. "Or for saying you walked away while continuing to engage with it at every opportunity." That blow landed squarely. Meghan blinked a couple of times. "I walked away from everything," she said tightly. "Status, security, my old life, even parts of my now," she said. Meghan shook her head slowly. "It's a way of saying people notice when the script never evolves." "So what exactly would make you happy?" Meghan demanded. "That I disappear? That I never speak again?" Meghan replied instantly. "Perspective," she said. Meghan laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Easy to request from someone who's never been under this level of global scrutiny," she retorted. "Intense scrutiny is real," Meghan said. "It's not the same thing as persecution." That pushed it over the edge. Meghan sat even straighter, eyes blazing. "You have absolutely no idea what real persecution feels like," she said. Meghan held her stare. "Neither do the people who endure unspeakable things," she replied, "and never turn it into content." The air crackled. Meghan's breathing got faster. "You're crossing a line," she said. Meghan didn't look away. "Only because you drew one," she answered. For the first time, Meghan didn't immediately fire back. Her silence spoke volumes. The microphones picked up everything: the tightened breaths, the thick quiet, the barely contained fury. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer glanced nervously at the time, because what had begun as a controlled interview had morphed into something else entirely. The only question left was no longer if Meghan would snap, but when. The low hum of the AC sounded louder now, like the room was pretending nothing had changed, even though everyone knew it had. Meghan wasn't smiling anymore. She was leaning forward, shoulders tense, gaze locked onto Meghan with the look of someone who had decided this was no longer a Q&A. It was a test she refused to fail. Meghan glanced briefly at her notes again. "Before we keep going," she said calmly, "I want to be clear on one point." Meghan didn't blink. "Go ahead," she said. Meghan kept her tone steady. "You've said more than once that you left the royal structure to find peace, to reclaim privacy, to feel safer. That's correct?" Meghan nodded once. "Yes," she said, "that's right. And yet," Meghan continued, "since then, your presence in the media landscape has been constant, arguably heavier than many entertainers who work full-time in the industry." Meghan's jaw clenched. "So we're circling back to this again. We're back on your favorite topic, consistency." Meghan didn't look away. "I'm not treating speaking as a crime. I'm asking why the message never seems to evolve." Meghan leaned back slightly, her tone turning icy. "Because facts don't magically shift just because people like you get bored with them," she replied. Meghan's brows lifted slightly. "So, in your view," she asked, "criticism exists because people are restless?" Meghan's lips curled into something like a smirk. "I think certain media figures," she said, "have built entire careers out of turning other people's real anguish into entertainment segments." Meghan's expression didn't change much, but her eyes sharpened. "Certain media figures," she repeated. "Meaning what, exactly?" Meghan nodded. "I mean people whose income depends on being outraged at someone like me every week." The room went dead still. Off camera, you could almost feel a producer silently mouthing, "Be careful." Megyn didn't react to the jab. Is that how you handle criticism? She asked. Give it a label, dismiss it, move on? Megyn leaned in. No, she said. I call it a boundary. Megyn nodded once. All right, then let's test where that boundary is. She paused. If this is you setting a boundary, what happens when someone asks a question you don't like? You're not just asking questions, you're attaching motives to everything I say. Megyn didn't deny it. Motives matter, she replied, when your story is also your product. Megyn's hands moved again, still trying to stay composed, but the strain was obvious. You keep calling it a product. What about yours? Your show, your platform, your ratings, your sponsors. You also earn money from this. Megyn smiled faintly. I don't present myself as a wronged heroine. That's not my brand. Megyn's eyes flashed. Now we're doing moral superiority, she said. We're doing precision, answered Megyn. Megyn laughed once, humorless. Precision, she echoed. Then she leaned closer and slowed her words deliberately, making each one hit harder. You're angry I didn't collapse. Megyn's eyes never left her. No, I'm skeptical because you keep describing yourself as both shattered and unbreakable, depending on the audience. A beat. Megyn stared. Spell that out, she said. You've described the institution almost destroyed you. You've described being hunted, crushed, isolated. Megyn's face tightened. Because that's what it felt like. And then, Megyn continued, in other spaces, you present yourself as the most enlightened, strongest voice in the room. It starts to sound less like healing and more like a marketing arc. Because I survived, Megyn shot back. Or, said Megyn softly, because survival became the centerpiece of your brand. That sentence didn't blow up the room, it froze it. Megyn's mouth opened like she was going to snap instantly, but nothing came out for a second. Her eyes dropped to the table, then lifted again. You're vile, she said quietly. Megyn didn't flinch. That's not a response to the question. You're vile, she repeated, louder this time, because this is exactly what the tabloids did. You're just doing it with better cameras and nicer chairs. Megyn tipped her head slightly. Tabloids printed accusations, she said. I'm asking about contradictions in your own words. Megyn shook her head in disbelief. You really see yourself as the moral one here, don't you? She said. No, I see language as incredibly powerful, especially when it shapes how millions of people see everything around them. Megyn leaned even closer. Here's a word for you, she said. Obsessed. Megyn's eyes narrowed just a touch. That's another label, she said. You are obsessed with me, with Harry, with everything we represent. You don't care about nuance. You care about staying in the conversation. The Megyn's lips pressed together for a second. So now you're questioning my motives, she said. At least I'm admitting it, Megyn snapped. Are you? Answered Megyn quietly. That single question flipped something. Megyn's whole posture changed. The polished composure didn't just crack, it started to break apart. She lifted one hand in a small cutting gesture, not wild, but sharp enough that the cameras caught the accusation in it. You people, she said, voice edged, you sit behind microphones and call it courage. You've never had to walk into a room knowing people are waiting for you to trip. Most people have, replied Megyn. They just don't get paid for others watching it happen. Megyn's eyes widened. There it is, jealousy. Megyn's face stayed almost expressionless. I don't envy being torn apart publicly, she said. You envy reach. You envy influence. Megyn exhaled slowly. If influence is built on saying the same thing forever, it's not influence, it's noise. You're trying to shut me up, said Megyn, her voice rising again. Megyn's gaze stayed level. No, I'm trying to get an honest answer. I am answering, fired back Meghan. Meghan didn't move. No, she said, you're performing. Meghan's head jerked back a little. Performing, she repeated. Meghan nodded. You're giving the version of yourself that trends, not necessarily the one people could actually trust. Meghan's hands clenched into fists in her lap. The camera barely caught it, but it caught enough. Meghan glanced back down at her notes. Let's get concrete, she said. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Specific how? She demanded. Meghan kept her tone level. Specific as in statements that have evolved over time. Meghan's face went rigid. I'm going to read you 2 lines, said Meghan evenly, both from your own appearances. You tell me which one you stand by today. I'm not here for some courtroom stunt, she snapped. Then don't treat it like one, replied Meghan. Just answer. Meghan's breathing picked up. Somewhere off camera, a producer's low voice murmured something, maybe stay focused, maybe keep it moving, but the train wasn't on the tracks anymore. Meghan lifted one of the pages slightly. Meghan stared at it like it was a trap being lowered onto the table. Ready? Asked Meghan quietly. Meghan's smile reappeared, but now it was thin and openly hostile. Go ahead, she said. Let's see your big gotcha. Meghan's eyes didn't flicker. The way she held the paper, steady, precise, made it feel like the next half-minute would decide everything, because once she read those lines out loud, there'd be no polite, easy path back to neutral. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The page